The last reliable sighting of Jessie Albertine Hoover happened on a drizzly afternoon in late May. She stood at the Apple Bridge checkpoint, a 54-year-old widow from Texas with a faded blue backpack and a dream she had carried since she first saw the National Geographic article years ago. The trail ahead of her was the most remote section of the entire Appalachian Trail, the 100-mile wilderness. Signs warned hikers to carry at least 10 days of food. Jessie had 3 pounds of beef jerky and a lightweight jacket. The gatehouse attendant watched her hesitate at the trailhead. She asked about the weather. She adjusted her pack straps. Then she nodded once and stepped onto the path, disappearing into the thick green tunnel of trees. She was never seen again by anyone who would live to tell about it. 2 months later, when her sister finally convinced authorities to search, rangers combed 15 million acres of dense forest. They found nothing. No backpack, no clothing, no body. The Maine Warden Service used what they called a fine-tooth comb across those woods. A spokesman later said with quiet certainty, "If she was there, we would have found her." But here is what haunts the people who know this story. Jessie had epilepsy. She had a detailed itinerary. She had planned to wire money at specific stops along the trail. She had arranged with her doctor to receive refills of her medication at predetermined locations. She never picked up a single prescription. Search teams later found that she had tried to climb Mount Katahdin on May 20th, 3 days before she reached Apple Bridge. Rangers turned her back, warning that she lacked proper supplies. She ignored them, or perhaps she didn't hear them at all. By then, something may have already been wrong. The official report notes that she was wearing light clothing unsuitable for Maine's spring temperatures, which regularly dropped into the 30s at night. Hypothermia is possible. Disorientation is possible. A seizure in the wrong place at the wrong time is possible. But none of these explanations account for the complete absence of evidence. No torn fabric on a branch. No water bottle dropped beside a stream. No footprint in the mud, though the trail that spring saw light rain and soft earth. The best theory, and it is only a theory, is that she simply walked until she couldn't walk anymore, then lay down somewhere so deep in the wilderness that even the animals didn't find her. Or perhaps something found her first. In 2014, a reporter tracked down Jessie's daughter, Mary Yadden, still living in the same Texas home where her mother had once planned her fateful journey. Mary submitted her DNA to a national database of missing persons, hoping for a match with any set of unidentified remains found in the Maine woods. As of today, no match has ever been found. The mountains have kept their secret for over 40 years. Sometimes, on cold spring nights, hikers near the 100-mile wilderness report hearing a woman's voice calling for help from somewhere deep in the trees. Search and rescue teams have gone out looking multiple times. They never find anyone, but the calls keep coming. The Martin family had camped in the Smokies many times before. Dennis was 6 years old, small for his age, with a gap-toothed smile and a habit of wandering just a few steps ahead of his father. On June 14, 1969, the family was celebrating a wedding anniversary near Spence Field, a remote backcountry site accessible only by foot. Around mid-afternoon, Dennis announced he needed to use the bathroom. His father pointed to a thicket of bushes about 20 yards from their campsite. "Don't go far," he said. Dennis nodded, turned, and walked behind the bushes. William Martin heard his son's footsteps on dry leaves. Then he heard nothing. He waited a minute, 2 minutes. He called Dennis's name. No answer. He walked to the bushes. There was no sign of his son. No footprint. No disturbance in the undergrowth. No evidence that any child had been there at all. What happened next became the largest manhunt in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. More than 1,400 searchers were deployed, including FBI agents, U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, and teams of bloodhounds. The dogs tracked Dennis's scent from the campsite to the bushes. There, the trail simply ended. The dogs circled, confused, unable to pick up any scent leading away. The Green Berets, trained for jungle warfare, described the terrain as impossibly dense. Yet even they found nothing. Then the searchers started reporting strange things. Several Green Berets claimed to have encountered wild men in the deep woods, naked, hair-covered figures that moved with unnatural speed through the trees. One soldier reported seeing a deformed face with white eyes staring at him from between two rocks before vanishing into a crevice that seemed too small for any human to enter. The official search was called off after 17 days. Dennis Martin was presumed dead, though no body was ever recovered. But the unofficial stories continued. Over the following years, hikers reported seeing a small, ragged figure moving through the mist near Spence Field, always at dusk, always just at the edge of vision. Some said it was a child. Others said it was something wearing a child's shape. A local legend grew that Dennis hadn't died at all, but had been taken by the feral people rumored to inhabit the deepest hollows of the Smokies, descendants, according to folklore, of Civil War deserters who had retreated into the mountains and never returned to civilization. These wild people, witnesses claimed, had sunken eyes, elongated limbs, and a taste for human flesh. One woman reported seeing a naked man, hairier than average from the waist down, with blood smeared across his face, while hiking near a waterfall in the same area where Dennis disappeared. Decades later, in 2024, the case was reopened briefly when new witnesses came forward. They reported seeing a small boy matching Dennis's description, walking with an unnaturally tall figure along a remote ridge. When rangers investigated, they found only a single child's shoe, too decayed for DNA testing. The shoe size matched Dennis's. But like everything else in this case, it led nowhere. The boy who stepped behind a bush is still out there somewhere, according to the whispers. And on certain moonless nights, if you listen carefully at Spence Field, you can hear a child's voice calling for his father. The calls never stop, and no one goes to look anymore. In the winter of 1899, 28 men disappeared from the small towns surrounding the Appalachian foothills. 28 fathers, brothers, husbands, gone without explanation, without ransom notes, without bodies. The only connection between them was a remote cabin belonging to two sisters. Local accounts described the women as hauntingly beautiful yet unsettlingly cold. They lived in complete isolation, venturing into town only once a month for supplies. When they walked the dirt streets, heads turned. Their eyes were described as too knowing, and their smiles as never reaching their faces. Men began visiting the sisters' cabin, one by one. They would leave at dusk and simply never return to their homes. The first few disappearances were blamed on the wilderness. A man could get lost, fall in a ravine, be killed by a bear. But when the numbers climbed past a dozen, people started talking. A survivor, the only one, later told a story that would haunt the region for generations. He had gone to the sisters' cabin seeking adventure, drawn by their reputation and his own foolish pride. The sisters welcomed him with warm bread and wine that tasted faintly of bitter herbs. As the night deepened, he noticed things, symbols carved into the floorboards, a heavy iron door set into the floor, strange chanting from somewhere below. The sisters began to speak in a language he didn't recognize. Their voices overlapped, finished each other's sentences. Their eyes reflected the firelight in a way that human eyes should not. He ran. He didn't look back. He heard laughter behind him, not angry, not even loud, but somehow pleased. When authorities finally investigated the cabin, they found nothing. The sisters were gone. The iron door in the floor opened onto a cellar that seemed to extend far beyond the footprint of the house. In that cellar, investigators reported finding nothing but chains bolted to stone walls and a dark stain on the floor that no amount of scrubbing could remove. 28 men had vanished. No remains were ever found. Later, when forensic techniques advanced, investigators returned to the site with ground-penetrating radar. Beneath the cellar floor, they found anomalies, disturbances in the soil consistent with multiple graves. But when they dug, they found only animal bones, or what appeared to be animal bones. The local coroner, a man of science who did not believe in ghosts, noted that the bones had been modified in ways he could not explain. Cut marks, yes, but also patterns of wear that suggested the bones had been used as tools, or perhaps as something else entirely. The cabin burned down in 1903, cause unknown. Locals said the fire started spontaneously, burning so hot that nothing remained but ash and a single iron door, still leading down to a cellar that held nothing but darkness. To this day, hikers in that section of the Appalachians report hearing strange sounds at night. Chains dragging across stone, and two female voices speaking in unison somewhere below the earth. If you listen closely, you can still hear the sisters, and they are still waiting for visitors. Dudleytown was never meant to be a ghost story. It began as a prosperous iron mining village in the Litchfield Hills of Connecticut, founded by the Dudley family who had emigrated from England in the mid-18th century. The land was good. The industry was thriving. The future seemed bright. Then the curse began. It started with the Dudleys themselves. Family members began dying under mysterious circumstances: sudden illnesses, freak accidents, unexplained violence. One Dudley went mad and was institutionalized. Another died by suicide. A third simply vanished from his home one night, leaving behind a warm dinner and an open door. The village grew despite the losses, but a shadow hung over it. Crops failed for no reason. Livestock died in the night, their bodies untouched, but their eyes wide with what looked like terror. Children reported seeing shapes in the woods, figures that stood too still, that watched too long, that never seemed to blink. By the early 1800s, the iron industry had collapsed. Families began leaving. But the strange thing, the thing that turned Dudleytown from a failed settlement into a legend, was that even those who left couldn't escape. Former residents reported being followed. They would see figures standing at the edge of their new properties, always facing away, always just at the edge of vision. They would hear knocking on their doors at night, 3 knocks in sequence, with no one there when they opened. The last resident abandoned Dudleytown at the start of the 20th century. Within a generation, the forest had reclaimed everything. Houses collapsed, roads disappeared, and the village became a dark patch on old maps that no one visited. Then the paranormal investigators arrived. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous demonologists who investigated the Amityville haunting, filmed a Halloween special in Dudleytown during the 1970s. Their conclusion was chilling. The land itself was possessed. Something ancient and malevolent lived in the soil, the trees, the very air of Dudleytown, and it did not want visitors. People who ignored the warnings reported similar experiences: feelings of being watched, of being followed, of hearing whispers in a language they didn't understand. Some reported seeing ghostly figures, the Dudleys, perhaps, or something wearing their faces, standing among the ruined foundations. One hiker, who trespassed into Dudleytown despite the no-entry signs posted by the Dark Entry Forest Association, later wrote that he had become disoriented in a way he couldn't explain. His compass spun. His GPS failed. The trees seemed to shift positions when he wasn't looking. He spent 3 hours walking in what he thought was a straight line, only to emerge exactly where he had started, in the center of the abandoned village. He reported seeing a woman standing beside a collapsed chimney. She was wearing clothing from another century. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply pointed toward the woods. He ran. He made it out. But he later admitted that something had followed him home. Knocks at night. Shadows that moved when he wasn't looking. A feeling of being watched that never fully went away. As of 2025, Dudleytown is strictly off-limits to visitors. Local police will arrest and prosecute any trespassers. But the signs warning people to stay away are not just about liability. The Dark Entry Forest Association, which owns the land, has added its own warnings. Enter at your own risk. The land is not safe. No one who has gone into Dudleytown after dark has ever reported anything good. Some have reported things they refuse to describe at all. And at least 3 people who entered the village since 1990 have never been seen again. Their names are not public. The families have requested privacy. But if you know where to look on missing persons databases, you will find them. 3 entries, all dated, all listing their last known location as the same patch of forest in Litchfield County, Connecticut. No bodies were ever recovered. The land refused to give them back. In this area, 5 terrifying incidents have happened that I'm going to tell you about next. So let's begin with the first one. The first disappearance happened on a crisp October afternoon in 1945, when the Vermont woods were burning with autumn colors. 74-year-old Mid-Eye Rivers was not the kind of man who got lost. He had been hunting and trapping in these mountains since he was a boy, back when roads were dirt and bears were more common than cars. He knew every ridge, every stream, every hidden hollow of Glastonbury Mountain. His family trusted him. The other hunters in his party trusted him. When they stopped for a break near Hell Hollow Brook, Midday announced that he knew a shortcut back to camp. He said he would meet them there in 20 minutes, maybe half an hour at most. He slung his rifle over his shoulder, nodded once, and walked into the trees. The other hunters arrived at camp 30 minutes later. Midday was not there. They assumed he had stopped to check a trap line or maybe spotted a deer and decided to follow it. An hour passed, then two. As the sun began to dip behind the ridgeline and the temperature dropped toward freezing, the men grew worried. They went back to the spot where they had last seen him. They found his footprints leading away from Hell Hollow Brook, clear and deep in the soft earth. They followed the prints for several hundred yards, calling his name, shining their flashlights into the gathering darkness. Then the footprints stopped, not faded away, not washed out by a stream or scattered by wildlife. They simply ended, as if Midday Rivers had been standing on that patch of forest floor 1 second and vanished into nothing the next. The last set of prints showed his heels dug in slightly, as if he had paused to look at something. There were no prints leading away from that spot. No scuffle marks suggesting a struggle. No drag marks. No animal tracks. No sign of any kind to explain what had happened. The next morning, authorities launched a full-scale search. More than 200 volunteers formed human chains and swept through the woods. Bloodhounds were brought in from neighboring counties. The dogs picked up Midday's scent at the trailhead and followed it confidently to the exact spot where the footprints ended. There, the dogs stopped. They circled the area, sniffing the ground, the trees, the air. Then they sat down and whined softly, their tails between their legs. They had lost the scent completely, as if the man they were tracking had simply ceased to exist. Search teams found Midday's rifle leaning against a tree about 50 yards from where the footprints ended. The rifle was fully loaded, the safety still on, as if he had put it down gently for no apparent reason. They found his hunting cap hanging from a low branch. They found his canteen sitting on a flat rock, still half full of water. But they found no trace of Midday Rivers himself. Not a single bone, not a scrap of clothing, not a drop of blood. Weeks later, when the snow began to fall and the search was officially called off, a local logger named Henry B. came forward with a strange story. He had been working near Glastonbury Mountain on the night Midday disappeared, cutting timber a few miles from the search area. Around midnight, he said, he heard a voice calling for help. The voice sounded old and weak, and it seemed to be coming from beneath the ground. Henry grabbed a shovel and started digging. He dug until his hands bled, but he found only dirt and rock and roots. The voice called out 3 more times, each one fainter than the last, and then it stopped forever. Henry told the sheriff what he had heard. The sheriff listened politely, thanked him for his time, and wrote nothing down. But Henry was not the first person to report voices rising from the earth in that part of Vermont, and he would not be the last. The disappearance that made the Bennington Triangle famous happened just over a year later, in December of 1946. Paula Jean Weldon was 18 years old, a sophomore at Bennington College, a cheerful and responsible young woman who called her parents every Sunday and never stayed out past curfew. She was not the kind of girl to run away. She was not depressed. She had no secret boyfriend, no hidden troubles, no reason whatsoever to disappear. On the afternoon of December 1st, Paula decided to go for a walk. She told her roommate she would be back in time for dinner. She put on her bright red jacket, the one her mother had given her for Christmas, the one that was so vivid it could be seen from half a mile away, and walked out the door of her dormitory. She was seen by multiple witnesses along the road leading to the Long Trail, one of the oldest and most famous hiking paths in America. The trail wound through dense forest, crossed several small streams, and eventually climbed the slopes of Glastonbury Mountain. Paula was seen at the trailhead by a local man named Lewis, who later told police she had asked him for directions. She seemed perfectly normal, he said, friendly, calm, not at all afraid. She thanked him, smiled, and walked onto the trail. That was the last time anyone ever saw Paula Weldon alive. When she did not return to her dorm by dinner, her roommate called campus security. By midnight, the college president had notified the Vermont State Police. By dawn, the largest search in the state's history was underway. More than 300 volunteers, college students, local residents, game wardens, even soldiers from a nearby army base, formed a grid and swept the mountain. Bloodhounds were brought in again, And again, they tracked the missing person's scent from the trailhead to a specific spot deep in the woods. And again, at that spot, the dogs lost the trail completely. The spot was less than a mile from where Mid-Eye Rivers had vanished the year before. Searchers found nothing. Not a scrap of red fabric. Not a footprint in the snow, even though several inches of fresh snow had fallen overnight. Not a single sign that any human being had passed through that area at all. It was as if Paula had walked into the woods and the woods had simply swallowed her. The search continued for weeks. Investigators interviewed everyone. Other students, local shopkeepers, hunters who had been in the area, truck drivers passing through on the highway. No one had seen anything suspicious. No one had heard anything unusual. The only lead came from a woman who reported seeing a disheveled-looking man near the trailhead on the day Paula disappeared. Police searched for this man, but never found him. Months passed, then years. Paula's father, a prominent engineer from Connecticut, spent his life savings on private investigators. He hired psychics, dowsers, even a man who claimed he could communicate with the dead. Nothing worked. He walked the mountain himself dozens of times, calling his daughter's name into the wind, until his voice gave out and his legs would carry him no further. In 1949, a logger working on Glastonbury Mountain found a human skull. The entire county held its breath. But forensic examination revealed the skull belonged to an indigenous person who had died at least a century earlier. It was not Paula. In 1955, a hunter found a woman's shoe near the long trail. Again, hope flickered. Again, it was extinguished. The shoe was too small to be Paula's. In 1992, nearly 50 years after she vanished, the Bennington County Sheriff's Office officially closed Paula Weldon's case. The file, which had grown to more than 2,000 pages, was marked unsolved and placed in a dusty cabinet. A sheriff's deputy told a local newspaper, "We never found her. We never found anything. It's like she went up the mountain and the mountain decided to keep her." But the mountain did not just keep Paula. It was just getting started.